In this video, we'll be making a blueprint interface to handle vehicle interactions. We can remotely control a character or pawn either through overlapping with a specific object or remotely through traces and projectiles. We can send our control back to our main character at any point with smooth camera transitions or playing animations, and we can change the control mappings and operate pawns such as this car, all while keeping the majority of our work outside of our player character. Alright, so we're going to be starting off with a new third-person template. I have a few actors that we set up to be able to possess. The first one is going to be a car imported from the vehicle project. I'll show you how to add that. The next is going to be a duplicate of our third-person character, which I named BP Dummy. And the third, I wanted to use a turret, but I'm too lazy to animate it, so I ended up making a gray box version of a Tesla coil from Red Alert 2, which I'm hoping that reference alone is worth a subscription from one person. Now, when you think of vehicles, you may only really think of the car. But in Unreal Engine terms, a vehicle is anything that we're able to possess. There is a specific function called possess that we're going to be using to take control of each object in the game. Possess takes two arguments. The target is going to be the player's controller, and the in pawn is going to be the actor that we want to control. So we can type in get player controller. And there's a few ways of doing this, and I'm sure you've seen tutorials on this before. We're going to start off the lazy way and just get a keyboard press. I'm just going to bind to E. And because we know we want to possess BP Dummy, we're going to get actor of class. And then choose BP Dummy as the class. Now, when we press play and we get into the map, wherever we are, whenever we press E, we're going to possess BP Dummy. Keep in mind that when we possess something new and we unpossess the other actor, it's going to continue doing whatever it's doing. That's why you see our original third-person character continuing in the walk animation, because that was the last input that it had. If you only have one thing to cast to, then by all means, feel free to do it this way. However, if there's more than one thing you want to cast to, it would be better and more scalable if we incorporated a blueprint interface. So you can right-click in the content browser and just type in interface in the search box. Then select blueprint interface. And I'm going to call this BPI_vehicles. So if you haven't used blueprint interfaces before, essentially what it does is that you add the interface to an actor blueprint, and then you're able to send information from one blueprint to the other so long as it incorporates the interface. So we're going to start off with our first function here, and we're going to call it possess vehicle. This blueprint is going to have two inputs, the first of which is going to be called pawn, and that's going to be of type pawn. And the second is going to be our player actor, which is going to be named after the blueprint that the player has. So in this case, BP_third-person character. Now it's important to note what a pawn is. A pawn is a type of actor that has the ability to be controlled either by a player or an AI. And a character is a very specific type of pawn, so you can plug in any character and any pawn into the possess node and it will work. Now we want to add the blueprint interface to our blueprints. Let's go to class settings, and on the right where it says implement interfaces, we're going to click add and add BPI vehicles. Now on the left under interfaces, you'll see the function that we have in our interface file. And we're going to go into BP Dummy and we're going to add the interface there as well. Now if I double click on possess vehicle, it'll create an event in our dummy character. And if I were to call the possess event here and hook up our controller, we can do all the work here without having to add any extra code into our third-person character. That way, if we wanted to not have the dummy in our level, we don't have to worry about having all of that code in our third-person character. Now, we're going to ignore the pawn and player actor portion of this right now, and instead we're just going to call the event possess vehicle from our third person character. It'll run the possess command, and all we need to do is set in pawn to be a reference to self. That way we can possess the character. So we're going to repeat the steps that we did before. We're going to press E, then we're going to get actor of class, and the actor that we're going to get is BP dummy. But this time, rather than calling possessed from the player's controller, we're going to call the possess vehicle event and make sure it's the one in parentheses that says message. So the message is going to be sent to a target actor. In this case, it's going to be BP dummy. We send it the information for the player actor so we can get a reference to self. And now you see when I press E, this works exactly the same way as before. Now the next step that we're going to do to expand on this is by getting this information from another actor. Say I don't want to directly be able to control BP dummy, I only want to do so if I'm standing on a specific platform or taking control of a specific device. To do that, I'm going to create a new actor. And I'm going to call it BP underscore control box. And this blueprint's only going to have two objects in it. The first is going to be a box collision, and the other is going to be a cube. And I want to make the cube small enough for the character to be able to step on, and I want the box collision to encircle the entire box. And just like the other two blueprints, we want to add the interface to this blueprint as well. Now the thought process behind this is that when we overlap initially with the box collision, we are going to be within range of being able to control BP dummy. We're also going to be able to get the information from BP dummy from that overlap. And then when we leave the box collision, then we're going to be marked as out of range, so we won't be able to possess BP dummy. In order to do that, we need to go back to our blueprint interface and add a new function. This function we're going to be calling vehicle info, and we're going to have two inputs. The first is going to be named pawn, and that's going to be of type pawn. And the second is going to be a boolean called in range. Now we're going to go back to our BP control box, and we are going to click on the box collision. On the right, all the way at the bottom, we can click on component begin overlap, and that'll create a new event. And we're going to repeat the process for end overlap as well. Dragging off of other actor, we can type in vehicle info and get the option that has message in parentheses. And then we can copy and paste that to our end overlap as well. At begin play, we're just going to copy our get actor of class from our third person character and just have it here, as this control box is specifically going to be used to control BP dummy. And we'll just promote that to a variable. Then we just connect the dummy variable into our pawn input for vehicle info. Then we could check the in-range box for our begin overlap. And now when we get this overlap information, it's going to be sending this event to our third-person character. So now we need to go to our third-person character blueprint and double-click on that event to create it. So now this info is being sent to us from another blueprint, but because it's a message, it's just a one-time deal. So if we wanted to store any of this information, we would need to have it be a variable. So we want to promote pawn and in range to variables so then we can use them in other events. So now we're going to be removing this actor of class and instead replacing with a branch. This branch condition is going to be whether or not we're in range. And if we are in range, we're going to connect this to the possessed vehicle message. Now the target that we want to go to is the pawn that we got the information from. And in our pawn actor, now that we are sending the player information, we can get rid of the self reference and connect the pins just as that. And then if we wanted to get back to our player character, we can just make a variable here for our player actor. And then because the target is the pawn that we want to control, we're going to connect pawn to pawn as well as target. And I'm just going to copy the keyboard key so then when we are possessing BP dummy, we can go back to possessing the third person character we started with. And I realized that I accidentally checked the wrong box, so then we were only in range after we exited the overlap. Now we can test this out. If I stand on the base and press E, I have fully possessed the dummy character and can completely move it. If I press E again, control goes back to the third person character. And I'm pressing E and nothing's happening because I'm no longer in range. So we're going to be moving on to the car portion for this. Now to add the car, you want to go to your content browser and click add. And we want to add a project or content pack and select the vehicle pack. Add the project, and after a few seconds, it's going to come up saying that you're missing plugins and you need to enable them. You can go ahead and just click the enable plugins box and it's going to ask you to restart in another few seconds. Go ahead and restart your project. Then when you load back in, you can drag the car into your scene. You're not going to see the static mesh. However, if you open the blueprint, you'll be able to set it. Just click on the mesh, and you could search for SKM sports car. Now, moving on to our car blueprint. If I were to possess this car as is, you'll find that it's impossible to control because the controls for the car work entirely different than the control that we currently have as our third person character. Now I'm going to add the blueprint interface to our car actor and go through setting up the possessed vehicle event as we did in the dummy character. And I'm going to go through making a box collision on the driver's side door of the car. That way when we overlap, we'll do the same thing as we did with the control box for the dummy. So now with our events in place, we can run up to the car and press E, and you'll find that I am actually possessing the car. The camera changed, but I'm not able to move anything. In order to control the car, we need to change our input mappings. So we could drag off the get player controller, and we're going to type in clear all mappings. Then we can go back to our third person character, and we can just copy the enhanced input local player subsystem and the add mapping context and paste it here. So you'll see from the drop down of the mapping context, we have two IMC default files, one of which comes with a third person character, and the other one's going to be for the vehicle character. We want to make sure that we choose the vehicle now after we clear our mappings. That way the only control context we use is going to be that of the vehicle. And when we possess the character back, we're going to have to repeat the same process, clear the vehicle inputs, and then have our third-person character inputs be remapped. And then just like in our dummy character, we're going to press E, and then we're going to possess the third-person character. And actually, we're going to reconnect our clear all mappings to the enhanced input subsystem node rather than our get player controller. Now, if we go to the car and press E, we could drive the car. If we press E again, we immediately switch back control to our third person character. Now, obviously, if you're watching a vehicle tutorial on how to get in and out of a vehicle, you might expect that there would be an animation that we could set up to open the door and close it behind you as the character gets into the car. That, honestly, is worth its own tutorial. One tutorial that has already been done. I'm going to link UE5 Poseidon's Enter Car tutorial in the description. It goes through how to rig your character to open and close a car door. It's a very good resource if you'd like to go that route with a vehicle, but we're going to be ignoring that portion for the purposes of this one and continuing on with the blueprint interface. So we're going to attach actor to actor. That way we can have our player character functionally get into the car. The parent actor is going to be a reference to self. And our target is going to be the player actor. And then we're going to make a new socket that's going to be holding the position of our actor. So I'm going to right click on the root and I'm just going to make a socket. We'll keep it as the default root socket. But we still want to put our character onto the car. And while the windows are tinted, so we're not going to be able to see our character in the vehicle if we had a sitting pose, what we're going to do instead is put the character on top of the car, so that way you can see, at least functionally, how this is going to work. So we enter in the name of our socket, and we're going to change the location and rotation rules to snap to target. Then we want the character to exit the vehicle, so we're going to detach from actor. We're going to drag in our player actor, and we're going to set the location and rotation rules to world. And we're going to raise the socket up just a bit more so then our character doesn't collide with the car. And then I'm just going to drag the car over a bit so I don't have to keep running across the map. If I get in the car, still a bit of collision, so we attach our actor to actor. We're just going to turn off the collision for our player character. And now when we get on top of the car, it doesn't push it into the floor anymore. We still have our character doing the running man on top of the car, which, as hilarious as that is, I suppose we should go through and stop that from happening. So the only thing that we really have to do is before we get into the possessed actor, we want to stop our movement immediately. And now we're properly car surfing. Though if we get off, it's going to stick us on our character because we didn't change the collision. So we'll copy the collision settings here and paste it at the end of our detach. And we'll just check the box for new actor enable collision. And now we're able to get in and out of the vehicle, toggle our collision, and control both objects. So now we're going to be moving on to the coil actor. And I'm just going to close down the other blueprints. Now in our actor, I already put in a collision box like I did with the other objects. So when we have our character inside the overlap box, we're going to be able to possess the actor. Now what's already included in this is the event begin and end overlaps, sending the vehicle information to our overlapped actor, as well as a Niagara effect that is deactivated at begin play. When we initiate this, what we're going to do is through the blueprint, we're going to possess the actor, but I want to change the camera position from our third person character to the camera that's on this object because there's a pretty big difference in spacing between the two of them. So as we did in the other two blueprints, we're going to promote pawn and play actor to variables. Then we're going to get our player controller. We're going to call possess. And connect our pawn. And obviously when we go to the control box, you'll see we can take over the camera of our actor. Now for a seamless transition between one viewpoint to another, we can drag off the player controller and we're going to get a function called set view target with blend. We'll say a blend time of 1.5 seconds, and the view target is going to be whatever our pawn sees. However, this node does not wait for the blend time to finish before executing the next pin, so we do need to put a delay in between our set view and possess, otherwise it's going to just finish immediately. And then finally, we can remake the button press event. So then when we are possessing the coil, when we press E, we'll go back to our player actor. And we can also set the view target going back to the character as well. And while it's outside the scope of this project, once you detach the player's controller from our third-person character, you can attach an AI controller and have AI control the third-person character while you control something else. Now, whenever we call possess vehicle, the pawn information that we've gotten so far has either been predetermined from another actor's blueprint or retrieved when we trigger an overlap. But if we don't want to do any of that and we want to have a dynamic way of getting the pawn to control, we'll need to make another interface event. And a good way to demonstrate how this is going to function is if we wanted to use a ranged ability, either through a projectile or a line trace, to be able to possess an actor. So I'm going to copy E, and I'm just going to change the binding to Q. And we're going to get a line trace by channel. Get the actor's location. And we'll get the actor's forward vector. Convert it to an integer or float, and we'll say 500 units away from us. And if that triggers, if we wanted to possess a pawn, the way that we're going to have to do this is to break the out hit. And the only relevant information that we have is the hit actor. But a hit actor can only be the target, it can't be the pawn. And if we don't have the information for the pawn, we can't possess it. So we're going to open up our blueprint interface again. And we're going to make a new function. And we're going to call it request control. And the only thing that we have to add here is an input for our player actor. BP third person character, object reference, and save. So now in our third person character, instead of possessing the vehicle, we're going to drag off the hit actor. We're going to get request control message. Player actor, we can get a reference to self. And then in our actors, we'll just be using BP dummy. We're going to go to the interfaces, double click on request control. And from here, we're going to call our vehicle info. Going to get a reference to self as the pawn. We'll just check in range. And then when we get this vehicle info, we send it back to our third person character. So now if we press E, we can possess it. Instead now, we can connect it directly to the end here. And I'm just going to put a small delay just so it can give it time to process all the commands. Okay, and we press Q, we now possess the dummy at a range. If I press E, I send it back. Now, if I press E, I'm still able to repossess the dummy because that was the last vehicle that we've got into. So what we can do after we possess the vehicle, we can drag in the pawn reference here and just say set. Now it will just set it as blank. So whenever we hit Q, we possess, we hit E, we repossess. And if we press E again, we can't possess anything else. Alternatively, if we didn't want to make another event because maybe you don't need to have the pawn variable declared in your other classes, if we disconnect pawn and say we want to possess dummy, what we can do is disconnect the in pawn, then just drag out to get a reference to self. You find now if we overlap with our actor, we can still possess the dummy and change control back to our third person character. One thing that I wanted to just iterate is that if I was in this car, I do change the mapping so then I am controlling this and have no control over the third person character. However, because we call the player actor in our interface, we could still influence it. So if I say copy this keyboard input and set it to Q when we're in our car, I could drag in the player actor, get its mesh, and call play montage. From there, I could play animations on our third person character even though I'm not in possession of it. So I turn the jump into a montage just to see. So now when I possess the car, and all my mappings and control is at the car, if I press Q, I'm playing the animation to be able to jump. And so that's everything that we really need to make a vehicle interface. Everything that we've done can be placed inside of the blueprints of the actors that we want to possess. So if they're no longer in the level, we don't have to worry about carrying all of that blueprint information with our third person character. All we really need is just an input to trigger a possession, another event to get the information from another actor, or another two, so then we can get the information dynamically and then possess the vehicle. Hopefully you now understand what a vehicle means and the various ways that we can interact with them. This has been the second of 2 submissions from free members on the Patreon, so this project will be cleaned, annotated, and be able to download for free as well. Huge thank you to Winterberry Shark and Thatcher Moss for being the pillars by which this Patreon stands atop of. As always, let me know if you like this tutorial by liking the video, and subscribe to let me know that you want to see more of these tutorials in the future. Thank you for watching, and I hope you've been inspired.